the current food crisis, it is urgently needed to ensure access to affordable, safe, nutritious food for all and to develop resilient food security. To this end, the G7 we identified structural vulnerabilities in the global food systems and set pathways to overcome them while addressing the pressing food issues in the short term. Let's bring in Dr. Satoru Nagao, non-resident fellow at the Hudson Institute. Thank you. Or
Yeah, thank you very
how
much for inviting me.
serious is the food crisis among the G7 countries?
For G7 countries, food crisis is not exist, but the food crisis problem is rise in the G7 because they want to get the support from global South. Because last year, you can remember, Russia's aggression to Ukraine has happened. So this means that Russia, under sanctions, Russia cannot export food so much, and Ukraine cannot export food so much. But they are influential. And indeed, coincidentally, the United States, Canada, these wheat produce countries face bad situations. So they cannot produce much. So that's why about the wheat, about the rice, completely different. Rice is producing much, but about wheat, the shortage of the wheat has happened. That's why the price of the food and energy also, energy that came from Russia is under the sanction. That's why the price of the food and energy has soared. That's why in the global South, a relatively poor country cannot get enough amount of the food and energy. And so rising price of the food and energy affects the political situation. Simply instability political situation has happened. And so crisis has happened. But this is very important security for global South countries. So G7 needs support from global South. That's why even if the for G7 food and energy crisis is not so serious, G7 must deal with this situation. Without this, global South will will import the food and energy from Russia. So, and sanction against Russia will be collapse. So that's why, or even if they're not collapse, ineffective. That's why for G7, this is the issue. This is very important issue. Now, Japan's presidency, Japan focusing on the global South, because in case of the G7, other six are former colonial master of the global South countries, many global South countries, but Japan is not. Japan, for a long time, Japan has supported producing the food or dealing with the energy prices by supporting the global South countries. That's why the Japan can be the bridge between the other G6 and global South countries. At least Japan tried to do that this year. And because Russia, they cannot export. Because of the Ukraine cannot harvest the agriculture products so much. This year, situation is serious for global South. Production itself is reduced, and the price of the food will rise more. That is a concern. That's why this year G7 must deal with the price of the food and energy, and how to do that. That is a matter of concern. And this year, Japan is the presidency of G7. This means that Japan must show the leadership in this issue. That is the current situation for G7. Thank you.
What are the short-term resolution for the food crisis?
Short-term resolution is not exist so much, but G7 countries or the Pacific countries or the more the rising powers, including the other rising power, even if they do not include the G7, they should establish the supplying system of the food and the energy for crisis. Because Russia's aggression to Ukraine is important crisis, but this is not only the crisis. For example, recently the Sudan crisis has happened, or the other crisis is repeatedly happen. So influential or not, it's of course case by case basis, but crisis is happen regularly in some area in the world. So this means that supplying food, supplying energy system is needed. And now the United Nations lacks the leadership. If so, G7 should show the leadership to establish the system. That is a short-term solution, I think. Thank you.
What can we look forward for resolving such food crisis in the months to come?
Long-term crisis is needed because last 30 years, since the end of the Cold War, so US-Soviet Cold War, the global trade is the main rule or main system the many countries develop. But under the global economy, if the price is cheap or quality is high, they do not rely on the local products. For example, even if the one country produce many rices or wheat, this kind of food, if they import more cheap prices, same food products, they choose to import was collapsed. So now Russia's aggression has happened, and people start to realize how important the local production of the food. And indeed, during the COVID-19 crisis, they understand how important nation-based economy, because they restrict international trade under the COVID-19 pandemic. So rule is changing. The global economy is changing. The people start to realize the food security, energy security. This means that local production is very important. Japan supports the local production of the food in other countries, especially global South country, for a long time. That's why Japan can continue this effort and expand this project. Local production will be a new trend in the next age, instead of just the open global economy. That is long-term solution. One by one, we need to solve in this case. Thank you.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, non-resident fellow at the Hudson Institute, thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is Reyron del Rosario. That's the Global Affairs Insider. Follow us to our next episode only here in IPDCI News Channel.